thank you for your patience and welcome. My name is Rick Kitson. I'm the Public Affairs Director of the City of Cupertino. Tonight is the next step in the very explicit public process relating to Apple Incorporated's proposed new headquarters, referred to as Apple Campus 2. So if you're not here for that meeting, you're in the wrong place. We're going to be talking about that project and specifically the California Environmental Quality Act, which we call CEQA, within which we are operating right now. There's very specific guidelines, very specific protocols, and as part of the public review process, we will be very clearly following those protocols. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you about how we got here and where we're at. I'll be followed by Adam Weinstein, who is with LSA. And LSA is the environmental consulting firm retained by the city specifically for this project. Adam will provide an overview of the environmental review process and specifically as it relates to this project. Following Adam's presentation, I'll quickly review how to make sure your comments and questions are included in the environmental document and the next steps in the public process here in Cupertino. So just over 2 years ago, Steve Jobs came into this room and from right about here shared his vision of Apple Campus 2 with our city council. The vision that he shared that night began our environmental review process. Since that time, many people have been working very, very hard on developing our environmental impact report, our EIR. These are long terms. We tend to use the abbreviated version. So there's two so far, CEQA and EIR. The EIR is the informational foundation of the public process. Right now, the EIR looks like this. It's only about 650 pages, and it's not finished. We're still working on it, and this meeting tonight is about the next step in that process. So if I could have Adam Weinstein come up and share with us where we are in the environmental review process and what we've been doing with our time the last several months.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. So Adam Weinstein, I'm your consultant. I manage the EIR process for this project. I'm really pleased to be here tonight to do a quick review of the environmental review process, as Rick mentioned, and then just to summarize the project really briefly, and then also the content of the EIR. So these next couple of slides that I'm going to show you summarize the environmental review process to date. Rick gave you somewhat of a foundation of that. And the environmental review process, the really important thing to understand about it is that it's punctuated by really distinct points where public input is requested. And I'll call these points out just so you have a better knowledge of how public involvement fits in with the CEQA process in general. So the very first step of the environmental review process, of course, is initiation of the EIR. And as part of that, there was a 30-day scoping period back in August and September of 2011. The scoping period occurred just when we started to work on the EIR, when we asked the public and government agencies to tell us what they wanted to see analyzed in the EIR. And to provide a forum for these types of comments, the city held a scoping meeting in September 2011 where members of the public were able to identify the key issues to be addressed in the EIR. And the city, during that 30-day period, also accepted written correspondence on the scope of the EIR. So the issues and the topics of concern that were identified during the scoping period were helpful to us as we conducted the research and analysis of the potential environmental impacts of the project. The research and analysis task for this EIR was a very big concerted effort that involved lots of technical staff ranging from traffic engineers to archaeologists and hydrologists looking at the potential impacts of the project from a very multidisciplinary perspective. All of this research and analysis was then compiled and refined to prepare the draft EIR, and that's the EIR that many of you have started reading, and the city published this draft EIR on June 6th. So we're now in the 45-day public review period for the draft EIR, the time when it's your chance to read the EIR and to let us know if there's anything missing that could help you understand the environmental issues surrounding the project and the project's potential environmental impacts. And so that's really the purpose of the meeting tonight, for you to submit your comments on the content of the draft EIR. Now, before we summarize the content of the EIR, I just want to show you a couple of slides to briefly review the project. So the project, as you all know, is the development of a new campus for Apple. It'll involve the demolition of about 2.7 million square feet of existing building space, including the old HP campus on the project site. And then after that demolition happens, there'll be the development of 3.4 million square feet of new office, research, and development uses for Apple, along with a couple 100,000 square feet of auditorium, fitness center, valet parking reception, utility plant, parking, and ancillary uses. And the project would also involve the removal of a segment of Prune Ridge Avenue to allow for development of a secure campus, which is one of Apple's key objectives for the project. So this is the project site plan here. This illustrates the basic layout of buildings on the project site from a bird's eye view. And you can see the circular main building in the northern part of the site. That's the building that would house most of the project's office and research and development uses. And then you can see the main parking structure and central plant at the southern end of the project site near Interstate 280. The remainder of the project site contains all of the other project facilities. It contains the fitness center, the auditorium, the security and parking receptions, and a second phase of office and research and development uses that would be clustered around North Tantau Avenue. And so as you can see from this bird's eye view site plan, the buildings on the site are organized to allow for a broad swath of private open space within and around the main building. There's lots of open space provided on the site. So as I mentioned a minute ago, the project would involve the closure of a segment of Prune Ridge Avenue, which is currently a public right-of-way, and which the city would sell to Apple. This slide illustrates that spatial extent of that closed segment, which runs from about the entrance to the Hamptons apartment complex on the west to the intersection with North Tantau Avenue on the east. Now, when we prepare an EIR, one of the key areas of focus is comparing what's on a given project site right now to what will be there when the project is built out in the future. And that comparison helps us evaluate the environmental impacts of the project. So this slide here shows the net change in certain development elements that would result from the project. So compared to existing conditions, the project would increase employment on the project site by about 9,356 jobs and would increase building space on the site by about 763,000 square feet. And then the parking supply as well would grow by about 1,780 spaces. The building footprint, however, on the site would shrink by about 9 acres, mainly as a function of consolidation of lots of smaller buildings into larger buildings. And there'd be an associated increase in landscaping of about 59 acres. And the number of trees on the site would also increase by about 2,500. So that's, again, as a function of the increase in open space on the project site. Now, in these next several slides, I want to give you a sense of the content of the EIR and where to find certain topical discussions in the document. One precautionary note, this isn't a comprehensive list of EIR issues, just a compilation of some of the more important topics that are addressed in the EIR. So our planning policy analysis, that's the one in Chapter 4 of the EIR, looks at the consistency of the project with policies and documents that guide land use planning in Cupertino. So we're looking at things like documents like the city's general plan, the zoning ordinance, and the Santa Clara Valley Water District Creek planning guidance, looking at the planning of land uses around riparian zones. The land use and population analysis, in the land use analysis, which is section 5A of the EIR, we look at the effects of the project on the physical configuration of the community, including the impacts on community layout and connectivity associated with the closure of that segment of Prune Ridge Avenue that I talked about a minute or so ago. In the population, employment, and housing analysis, which is section 5C of the EIR, we explore how the project might change the demographics of the region, including the effects on local and regional population and employment growth. The aesthetics section in section 5B of the EIR looks at how the project could change the visual character of the project site, including whether the proposed buildings proposed as part of the project could block views of the Santa Cruz Mountains, and to what extent the project could change levels of light and glare. And to assist in this analysis, we prepared photo simulations of the project showing the look of the project site both before what's on the ground right now and after project implementation. And we prepared these visual simulations from several viewpoints around the project site. And so you can see those simulations in section 5B of the EIR. Biological and cultural resources, sections 5D and 5E. These are actually among my favorite sections of the EIR. They catalog the natural resources on the site, birds, Calabasas Creek, and trees, along with known historic resources, including, in this case, Glendenning Barn, which is associated with an early farmstead in Cupertino. And so the analysis in these two sections looks at the potential effect of the project on these resources. The geology, hydrology, and hazards analyses in sections 5F through 5H evaluate the development constraints on the site associated with issues like soil conditions, flooding, and past hazardous materials cleanup efforts, and then it looks at how those constraints in combination with the project could affect the environment. The transportation and circulation analysis in section 5.1 explores many of the issues that were raised during the scoping period when we started work on the EIR. It assesses the current state of the transportation system that could be affected by the project, and then looks at how the project might change the operation of the system. The analysis explores really the whole range of transportation modes, not just getting around in a car, but also pedestrian and bicycle access, and focuses in on particular issues, including how the removal of the Prune Ridge Avenue segment could affect circulation, and how Apple's transportation demand management program would operate to reduce some of the traffic generated by the project. This transportation and circulation analysis also looks at the relationship between parking supply and demand on the project site too. The noise, air quality, and greenhouse gas emissions analysis in sections 5J through 5L look at a range of issues, including noise generated by project traffic, the effects of project energy use and traffic on regional air quality, and energy and sustainability features that are incorporated into the project. The project includes quite a few sustainability features, and the analysis looks at how these might reduce the project's greenhouse gas emissions. The public services and utilities analysis in section 5M looks at the current operation of a wide range of services and infrastructure, ranging from fire protection to wastewater and water service, and how the project might affect the physical elements of these services. So key subtopics of interest here include how the project could affect the provision of open space in Cupertino, how it could affect the water supply, and effects on emergency response times, school enrollment, and then also utility service standards. So that's the content of the EIR in a nutshell. And before I turn it over to Rick, I just want to encourage you to spend some quality time with the EIR. As you can tell, and as Rick mentioned, it's a pretty voluminous document. There are lots of technical analyses in it, but it's really designed to give somebody who's not an expert in traffic, who's not an expert in noise or biology or other environmental issues that are covered in the EIR, the ability to really understand the environmental consequences of the project. And as I've kind of laid out in these last several slides, the EIR is organized in a way that allows you to page right to your topic of interest. So if you're focused on biological resources, you can turn right to that chapter. If you're interested only in transportation, you can turn right to that chapter. So please do pick up the EIR and read it, and also let us know your thoughts on the content. Thanks.
Adam, before you relax too much, on your slide you had the preparation of response comments documented in the EIR. When do you expect that to be provided?
The response to comments document will probably be available sometime in September.
Okay.
Probably
So,
in terms of release it. to agencies and the public?
So the response to the document, to the questions and comments that you provide tonight will be responded to in the final EIR document. And we expect that, as Adam indicated, in April. I'm just testing. I told you I was testing you. The EIR project hearings that you saw on Adam's slide, there will be a minimum of 4 of those. And those are much more of what we're used to locally, where there is public testimony and informational presentations and questions and answers from the public and from the planning commissioners and city council. There's going to be 4 of those. The first will be a public study session held in early October. Depending on how long this process takes, it's a public process. It's not a production line. So it really depends on the input and response that we get from all of you. So when that is finished, when the final EIR is completed, we will have a public study session early October. Following that, there will be at least 1 planning commission meeting, and there will be at least 2 city council meetings. So there will be 4 other opportunities that you will have to provide public testimony. Today is all about the EIR process. So tonight, your comments and questions, if you haven't already submitted them, or if you decide after reading the EIR you have more, there's any number of ways to do that. We have a public comment period open until July 22nd at 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. Apple's a global company, so it's important to remind people of that. There are several ways to submit your comments. We really like the web. There's cards around. The email address, the URL is on the card. If you have a smartphone, you can scan it, or just go to cupertino.org/Apple comments, and it'll take you right to the form. You see that address right on the screen here. That address is also on the card if you just want a handy reminder. Input your comments. There's no fuss, no hassle. It just goes right into the process. The other way to comment is via comment card here this evening. I'm looking at Adam's directions to the meeting. Comment card. There's a lot around here this evening. Every city facility has them. If you don't want to pick them up here this evening, the library has them. Fill them out, turn them in. If you turn them into any city facility, they will be directed to City Hall and they will be processed. Or you can just fill them out this evening and we will process them tonight in the lobby and they'll go right into the process. We want to make this as simple and comprehensive as possible. Everything that you provide as part of the comment process is part of the public record. So you'll see on the comment card and on the web form that there are spaces for your name, address, all sorts of things. The only required element is your comment. Anything and everything you provide as part of this process is part of the public record. So we don't want you to be surprised that suddenly there's a report with your name and address in it. So it's a public process, it's a public document. We take it seriously and we want you to take it seriously as well. Now we will also, if you want to keep the Postal Service busy and want to write it out longhand, just send it to City Hall, 10300 Torrey Avenue in Cupertino, and we'll get that and we'll take care of it and we'll make sure it gets into the record. Now we have a lot of work that's gone into the environmental impact report. We have 650 pages just in the EIR itself. I showed you a hard copy of that earlier. Hard copies are available at the City Hall in the City Clerk's office. They can also be checked out from the library. We would rather not print them. We had one copy walk away from City Hall within the first day. So it's not our preferred way of sharing. It's a very thick document, and there's thousands and thousands of pages of supporting documentation. This evening, we have CDs if you want to look at them. We also have flash drives available that have the entire EIR and all the supporting documentation on it. It's in a searchable PDF format, very convenient. They're free this evening at each of the tables around the room. They have some. Please just take one. And if you don't get a flash drive or you can't use a CD, it's all online. Just go to cupertino.org/Apple Campus 2. You may be noticing a theme here. You'll find everything you need on that site. Also, if you want to be updated for when Adam finishes the EIR, when it's all finished, if you sign up to that notification on that website, you will be noticed as soon as it comes out. It's really that simple, and that's really the fastest way to know what's happening with this project. So with that, thank you. Public comment process, again, for the EIR closes Monday, July 22nd, 5:30 p.m. Get your comments in. Tonight we have a number of city employees and volunteers that are here to help you if you want to get your comments in now. Don't put it off. Can all the city staff wave? Yep, they're all here. They're all helpful people. They're here to be helpful. There's people in the lobby if you just have the hard copy cards. Feel free to ask or submit your comments or ask how to do it. They'll show you how to do it. Okay? Well, with that, thank you very much for your time, and we really appreciate your being part of this important process. Thank you.